Chapter 5 Karma Sannyāsa Yoga, the Yoga of the Renunciation of Action. Verse 1. Arjuna said, O Krishna, you talk of the renunciation of action, sannyas, but then again, you also speak of karma-yoga, the way of selfless action. Please tell me clearly, which of the two is best? Verse 2. Bhagavan Sri Krishna replied, both renunciation of action, sannyas, and the performance of selfless action, karma-yoga, give the highest benefit. Yet, of the two, the path of selfless action is higher than the renunciation of action. Verse 3. O mighty armed one, you should understand that one who is free of hatred and material desires is a true renunciate, sannyasi. He is beyond duality and is easily liberated from material bondage. Verse 4. Those who are immature and devoid of knowledge state that the path of renunciation and the path of karma-yoga are different. However, one who follows either of these paths perfectly achieves the results of both. Verse 5. That state which is achieved by renunciation is also attained by karma-yoga. One who sees these two systems as one and the same actually sees things as they are. Anuvrtti. The Vedic system recommends 4 spiritual orders of life, called ashrams. These are brahmachari, grihasta, vanaprastha, and sannyas. Brahmacharis are the celibate students. Grihastas are the family units. Vanaprasthas are the retired members of society, and sannyasis are the completely renounced persons who live a life of sacrifice, austerity, and cultivation of knowledge. Sannyasis are considered to be at the crest of all social and spiritual orders of life. Vedic scholars sometimes debate whether Sannyāsa Yoga, complete renunciation of activities, or Karma Yoga, actions performed selflessly, is better. Sri Krishna says in Bhagavad-gītā that both Sannyāsa Yoga and Karma Yoga are favorable for liberation. Both paths ultimately lead to the same goal, but of the two, the path of Karma Yoga is preferable. This subject is controversial among some scholars, because, according to their understanding, Karma Yoga is the performance of philanthropic works that are beneficial to the downtrodden section of society, such as the poor and the hungry. Such welfare work is indeed noble, but one should understand that when Krishna speaks of Karma Yoga in the Gita, he is specifically speaking about activities that are performed for his satisfaction and pleasure. Such activities are also known as Karma Yoga or Bhakti Yoga, because the result of action is offered to Krishna. In other words, noble philanthropic activities are good karma, but not Karma Yoga, unless they are offered to Krishna and performed on his behalf. When Karma Yoga is established as Bhakti Yoga, then its superior advantage over Sannyāsa Yoga is immediately understood. Sannyas Yoga is very, very difficult to execute. One has to strictly control the senses and renounce even the simplest comforts of life, such as a warm bath, comfortable sleeping place, etc. One has to live in the forest, fast regularly, and observe other austerities, such as sexual abstinence. For most people, this is very difficult, if not impossible. Karma Yoga, or Bhakti Yoga, on the other hand, is easily adoptable by anyone, at any stage, and leads quickly to the ultimate goal of life. In Karma Yoga, one performs devotional activities and follows basic principles of purity, such as no intoxication, no illicit sex, no gambling, and no eating of meat, fish, or eggs. These principles can be easily adopted by anyone. Similarly, the devotional activity of chanting the Maha Mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, is also easily taken up, along with meditation on the form of Sri Krishna. Mantra meditation is the recommended process of worshipping Krishna in Kali Yuga, Therefore, Karma Yoga is given first preference in Bhagavad-gītā. However, when Sannyāsa Yoga is dovetailed with Karma Yoga, and the sannyasi performs any and all sacrifices, austerities, and shares the knowledge of Bhagavad-gītā with others according to the desires of Krishna, then such a sannyasi becomes most perfect, and is naturally accepted as the guru or teacher of both paths. Verse 6. O mighty armed one, without Karma Yoga, renunciation is a cause for misery. However, that wise man that performs Karma Yoga quickly attains the absolute truth. Verse 7. One who is pure engages in Karma Yoga and controls the mind and senses. Although he engages in action, he is never contaminated, and he is filled with love for all living beings. Verse 8 and 9. One who is a knower of the truth, although he is engaged in seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, eating, moving, sleeping, breathing, talking, evacuating, accepting objects, and blinking the eyes, realizes that all his sense functions are interacting with the respective sense objects. Therefore he thinks, I am not doing anything. Verse 10. One who gives up all attachments and acts by offering all his actions unto the Supreme is never contaminated by any impiety, just as a lotus leaf is never touched by water. Verse 11. By giving up all attachments, the karma yogi performs actions through the medium of the body, mind, intelligence, and senses, simply for the purpose of self-purification. Verse 12. The karma yogi, giving up the results of his actions, attains everlasting peace. However, the selfish worker, being attached, desires the results of his actions, and therefore becomes ensnared. Verse 13. By mentally renouncing all actions, a sense-controlled living being can happily reside within the material body, neither acting nor causing others to act. Verse 14. The absolute truth does not create anyone's sense of proprietorship, one's actions, or the result of those actions. All this is enacted by the modes of material nature. Verse 15. The superconsciousness does not accept anyone's pious deeds or their impious deeds. Living beings are bewildered because their knowledge is covered by ignorance. Verse 16. Yet for those whose ignorance has been destroyed by knowledge of the self, their knowledge, like the rising sun, reveals the supreme truth. Verse 17. Those whose ignorance has been removed by knowledge, whose intelligence is absorbed in the Supreme, who contemplate the Supreme, who are fixed in Him alone, and who sing His glories, never take birth again. Verse 18. A wise man sees a learned and humble Brahman, a cow, an elephant, a dog, a low-born person, and all other living beings as equal. Verse 19. The cycle of birth and death has been conquered by those whose minds are fixed in meditating on the absolute truth, even while living in this world. Being faultless and possessing divine equanimity, they are situated in the Supreme. Verse 20. Being situated in the absolute truth, having fixed intelligence, and being devoid of ignorance, one who knows the Supreme never rejoices when he attains pleasant things, nor laments upon obtaining unpleasant things. Anuvrtti. In verse 15, the word Vibhu has been translated as Supreme Spirit. Vibhu literally means omnipresent, and this refers to Sri Krishna, the Supreme Conscious Being. When consciousness is omnipresent, the conclusion is that it is omniscient also. Omniscience and omnipresence denote Krishna. Arjuna, however, and other living beings of his status are called Anu, or finite. Krishna, the Absolute Truth, is infinite, and the living beings are finite. It is sometimes thought that God, somehow or other, dies for the sins of the world. This is not a very intelligent idea, nor is it consistent with the spiritual science found in Bhagavad-gītā. Krishna says that he does not cause anyone to perform pious or impious activities, nor does he accept the reaction of anyone's actions. The idea that God dies for our sins is rejected. God is eternal, therefore he cannot and does not die. The living beings are also eternal, but because they are under the bodily concept of life, when the body dies, they also experience death, although they actually do not die. Both the Absolute Truth and his parts and parcels are eternal beyond death. In verse 18, the relative vision of equality is expressed for one who is situated in transcendental knowledge. The wise man, a pandit, sees all living beings equally, as units of eternal consciousness. The distinction between various bodies is only an apparent difference between living beings. According to the Brihad Vishnu Purana, there are 8,400,000 different species of material bodies. Jalaja Navalakshani, Stavara Lakshavimshati, Krimayo Rudra Sankyaka, Pakshinam Dasha Lakshanam, Trimsha Lakshani Pashavash, Chatur Lakshani Manusha. Translation: There are 900,000 aquatic species and 2 million non-moving species, such as trees and plants. There are 1,100,000 species of insects and reptiles, and 1 million species of birds. There are 3 million varieties of quadrupeds and 400,000 species of human beings. The unit of individual consciousness, the Atma, transmigrates through these various species from one to the other until it eventually reaches the human form of life. This process is known as transmigration, or reincarnation. It is similar to the theory of evolution, but distinctly different at the same time. In the Vedic concept, the species of life are not evolving one into the other, though the change within species is accepted. Rather, it is the Atma that is evolving in consciousness while transmigrating from one species to the next. In the human form of life, consciousness reaches its completeness through the process of yoga. Therefore, a wise man does not discriminate between one person and another based on bodily differences. The wise sees the Atma present in all forms of life, and not just in human life. Verse 21. One whose mind is detached from external pleasures experiences the happiness found in the self. Connecting himself with the Absolute, he attains unlimited bliss. Verse 22. Those pleasures that are born in connection with the sense objects give rise to misery. They have a beginning and an end. Therefore, O son of Kunti, a wise man finds no satisfaction in the senses and sense objects. Verse 23. Before giving up this present body, if one is able to control the senses and the impulses that arise from lust and anger, one becomes self-satisfied. Such a person is a true yogi. Verse 24. One who finds happiness and bliss within and who is enlightened within is a perfect yogi. He attains the transcendental platform and achieves liberation. Verse 25. Yogis who are free from vice, self-controlled, whose doubts have been removed, and who are engaged in welfare work for all living beings, attain liberation in the Supreme. Verse 26. Those sannyasis who constantly endeavor for perfection, who have controlled their minds, who are self-realized, and who are free from lust and anger, soon achieve liberation in the Supreme. Verse 27 and 28. The yogi who shuts out the external sense objects and fixes his concentration between the eyebrows, stabilizing the inward and outward breaths that flow through the nostrils, and thus controls the senses, the mind, and intelligence, is dedicated to the attainment of liberation. He is never bound by desire stemming from lust, fear, and anger, and is certainly always liberated. Verse 29. One attains peace by knowing me to be the original enjoyer of all sacrifices and austerities, the supreme controller of all the planets, and the benefactor and friend of all living beings. Anuvrtti. In the last verse of this chapter, Sri Krishna declares that he is Bhoktaram Yagyatapasam, the ultimate enjoyer and receiver of all sacrifice and austerities. Krishna then says that he is Sarvaloka Maheshwaram, the controller of all planets. Some modern systems of yoga recommend that one meditate by thinking of oneself to be controlling and moving the planets. This is completely absurd. When one is unable to control the affairs of the world that surrounds him, how then is he able to control the movements of the planets? This is not actually meditation, it is self-deception. Sri Krishna concludes by saying that he is Suridham Sarvabhutanam, the true friend of all living beings. By far, the Krishna conception of the Absolute Truth is the broadest, most complete, in-depth, and convincing idea of God known to human society. There are many conceptions of the ultimate source of life, being the all-powerful creator and controller of the universe. But the Krishna conception is the only concept of ultimate reality that embraces a love affair with God as a dearmost friend. This is exclusive to the Krishna conception. Therefore, it is considered as the topmost theology, or topmost yoga system. Krishna says, Gyatva mam shantim brichyati. Knowing this, one attains peace. If ever there were something that was elusive in this world, then certainly it is peace. Peace is talked about everywhere, but it is rare, if not impossible to find. Bhagavad-gītā gives us a key to peace. Peace is not found in becoming rich and famous, in being saved, or even liberated from birth and death. Real peace comes from knowing that Sri Krishna is our dearmost friend. This is the message of Bhagavad-gītā. Om Tat Sat. Thus ends Chapter 5, entitled Karma Sannyāsa Yoga, from the conversation between Sri Krishna and Arjuna in the Upanishad known as Srimad Bhagavad-gītā, the Yoga Shastra of divine knowledge, from the Bhishma Parva of Mahabharata, the literature revealed by Vyas in 100,000 verses.